From Julia Brown to Ann Hibbins, here are your top 10 real witches in history scarier than demons. Coming up at our number 10 spot, we have Julia Brown. Now, Julia Brown is from a small town in Louisiana, and she was known to be a pretty terrifying witch in her time. She became known as a witch because she would perform spells and had charms, and yes, she would place curses on people. Yeah, this is a real person, folks. Apparently, she would perform rituals for people in the town and do spells for them, and eventually they began to take advantage of her, and that is when things took a turn. She started to tell people that bad things were going to happen to them. She would make predictions for them, such as tell them their death dates, and that really creeped a lot of people out. She loved to sing, and at some point she created a song about how she was going to get revenge on the town when she died. "When I die, I'm taking the town with me," she sang. Well, as you might have already guessed, when she died, she certainly got revenge on the town. As her casket was being lowered, rain fell on the town, and that rain eventually turned into a hurricane that wiped out the town. Yep, she might be scarier than a demon. It's possible. In our number 9 spot, we have Moll Dyer. It is unclear if Moll Dyer was a real person or if she was just a legend. People say that she was real, however, there have been no documents to prove this to date, so for the purpose of this video, we are going to say she was probably real. And by real, I mean a real witch, a real scary witch. Moll lived in Maryland in the 17th century. She apparently had tormentors when she was alive and put a curse on them before she died. She died running away from them and froze to death on a rock that the town still displays today, as apparently you can still see her handprint on the rock. The ancestors of her tormentors apparently are all cursed with bad luck. Well, all I can say is I would not want to marry into one of their families. Also, how do we know that they are still cursed with bad luck if they are, born and then told that they are cursed with bad luck? Because maybe they have attracted it now because they believe that they have bad luck. I say those people need to leave the town, forget this legend, and see if the next generation has bad luck, and then we will have proof if this curse has actually continued. Moll was spoken about in the famous movie The Blair Witch Project, in which I have not seen, but probably should. In our number 8 spot, we have Kate Batts. This is probably one of the scariest witches on this list. Kate Batts was a neighbor to a man named John Bell, and apparently was a witch tormenting John and his family from her grave. Very powerful. John and his daughter Betsy were tormented in many different ways. Betsy was attacked apparently by an unknown force, and they would both hear chain sounds and always feel on edge. Eventually, the entity that was tormenting them told them that she was their former neighbor, Kate Batts, and that she was going to destroy their family. Eventually, John was found dead with a small vial of liquid beside him, believed to be poison from Kate the entity. Apparently, she stopped tormenting the family after John passed. Why she was tormenting the family is unknown, but perhaps it was because John did something bad to her when she was alive. That's the only explanation I can think of. Perhaps his guilty conscience could have concocted the whole story. That feels possible as well. In our number 7 spot, we have Gerald Gardner. Known as the creator of Wicca, a religious version of witchcraft, Gerald Gardner is arguably scarier than a demon to some, but perhaps just an egotistical man to most. In 1954, he wrote a book called Witchcraft Today, and it became widely popular around the world, and it helped pave the way for more widespread acceptance of witchcraft. So even though that has done a lot of good for the community, he is a bit of a controversial character that may have caused harm as well. A lot of people are angry at the fact that he became known as the founder of Wicca when he himself did not actually find it. He just wrote a book about it and then got credited for it. This has angered many witches around the world, and many people are frustrated that he has claimed the title of founder when he indeed is not. Nobody likes a faker, and it does not do any good for the religion to have its leader be dishonest. Coming up in our number 6 spot, we have La Voisin. Catherine, aka La Voisin, was a witch in the 1600s in France who would do spells, mix potions, and tell fortunes to the townspeople. Apparently, she would hold black masses and she would channel the devil. She really grew to fame when she discovered that a lot of wives wanted their husbands to pass away, and so she created potions to help them do so. She gained quite a bit of fortune from these potions. After some time, she became more and more dark as she began to take the lives of innocent people as a sacrifice for the devil, and eventually she was arrested for killing many people and she was, burned at the stake. This woman seems absolutely terrifying, and I am so glad that I live in 2022 and not the 16th century. Definitely seems more terrifying than a demon. On second thought, perhaps she was actually one. In our number 5 spot, we have Agnes Sampson. Agnes was a well-known healer in her time, which was around 1590, when the King of Scotland single-handedly started the witch trials around the world due to his paranoia over witches and his belief that a witch was the cause for a few big storms in Scotland. Talk about paranoid. Heesh. Anyways, Agnes was one of the witches that was captured during this time and tortured and thrown in jail. She was known for her healing potions that worked like magic, and so naturally she was accused of being a witch. They didn't have naturopaths back then, so there's that. Anyways, turns out they were right to accuse her because while in jail she actually confessed and said that she worshipped Satan and that she even was physically involved with him, if you catch my drift. So yeah, after this, she was sentenced to death. In our number 4 spot, we have Ann Hibbins. In the 1650s, there was a woman by the name of Ann Hibbins who was accused of being a witch. And perhaps she was, but maybe not in the typical way like the others on this list. Perhaps she was just not a great person and her personality was scarier than a demon and she perhaps got what she deserved. Apparently, Anne was a very wealthy woman, being very connected, and her brother-in-law was a future governor of Massachusetts and her husband was a civil law officer. Her husband apparently condemned a woman for being a witch. When he passed away, she was left a bit in ruin and she wasn't very well liked. She had sued a bunch of carpenters years prior that her community loved, and that made people hate her. She was then accused of being a witch and sentenced to death. There's not too many reports on her, so it's hard to say if she really was a nasty woman or not, but if she was, then all I can say is this sounds like the case of Queen Karma herself. In our number 3 spot, we have Aleister Crowley. Aleister Crowley was one of the first witches known in Ireland. She apparently was married 4 times and outlived all of her husbands. Yep, of course that was unusual for this period, which was the 13th century. All of her husbands died mysteriously, and after every one, people grew more and more suspicious of her, naturally. Until her final husband died, then his kids accused her of poisoning him. Eventually, rumors began to spread that she had killed her husbands as offerings to the devil himself. She also wasn't very well liked in the town, so that didn't help her case either. But apparently she had been worshipping him for decades. People began pushing for her to be captured and to have a formal trial, but before they were able to, she fled the country. Thus proving that she probably did kill her husbands. She might not have been a witch, but it's definitely possible she was. In our number 2 spot, we have Malin Matsdotter. Malin and her husband were either evil or they were being possessed, because their story really gives me the creeps. In 1676, Malin's husband was sentenced to death for being inappropriate with an animal. Makes me sick. And Malin was accused of being a witch by her own daughter. Her daughter said that she would worship the devil. Apparently, many young ones went missing in her town, and people believed that she snatched them and sacrificed them. At her trial, she was accused of taking them, and since her daughter was among the accusers, she had no chance. She was sentenced to death. She died without a sound, which confirmed to many that she was a real witch because they apparently don't feel pain. Guys, maybe she was a real witch. If I get too close to the oven and feel the heat, I react. So if I was her, I would have made my exit the most dramatic show anyone would ever see. So dramatic people would laugh and wish they hadn't burned me. In our number 1 spot, we of course have Aleister Crowley. Not all witches are women, folks. Probably the worst witch that I have ever read about was a male, and he was the darkest they come. People called him the wickedest man to have ever existed. Scarier than a demon. In fact, he was probably Satan himself. Of course, I'm speaking of Aleister Crowley, who was alive not too long ago. Close to 100 years ago, he was being kicked out of Italy for his occult gatherings, where it is believed that he channeled Satan moon, and everyone danced naked under the moon. Such fun. He would refer to himself as the Beast or the Antichrist. He traveled around the world promoting his religion called Thelma and promoted his teachings. He wrote many books, including the Book of Thoth, the Book of Lies, and the Book of the Law. The scary thing about Aleister is that people still follow his teachings today. I'm Melissa Malin, and I hope that you have a good day, sir. Moll lived in Maryland. I had to like spell it out for myself that last time because one time everyone was like, what's Maryland?